kind of instructions on the feedback forms, because that doesn't necessarily have to be in the formal meeting. So I'm going to collect these forms after each of the interviews are completed. And so because there are so many educators in the room and you are such fantastic note takers, I have no doubt about that. However, your notes are not going to be helpful to the board. What will be helpful to the board is after the interview is complete, if you summarize your thoughts. That is what's going to be helpful to them, because you can imagine as we move through this process, they're going to have a lot of feedback forms. And so you want to be very clear in the message that you're sending the Board of Education, okay? So if you have to take notes, just because you don't have something else with you, just do it on the back. And then summarize those most salient points that you want the board to be aware of on the front of the form. And that'll be really helpful. Sound good? Any questions just about the forms or feedback? Thank you. We're just getting started. I know, but it's so hard to shift here, so we'll just adjust. Welcome. I'm so sorry. I'll do that when I want to.
Okay. All right.
Oh. We talked about this.
I know. Like, we ready? All right. With that, we will call this Board of Education meeting to order. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Secretary Holmes. Thank you. At this point, if there is anyone in the audience that would address or wish to address the board, you can do that at this time. And nobody to address the board, we will move on to our first candidate.
Our first interview this evening is with Dr. Pam Campbell, Superintendent of Columbia School District.
How are you? It's just Pam, so how's that? Hi, how are you? Hi.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for being here with us tonight. So you know, all board members will be asking questions, kind of in a round robin format. So we will start off with our opening question. And if you could, please tell us what has prepared you to be the next superintendent of the Waterford School District.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here with you this evening. I have a rich background in academics. My father was the math consultant in Lansing School District, and he had me from the time I was a little child, helping him sort math books and all sorts of things for math professional development. So I knew about professional development, and I think one of the things that has given me an opportunity to be a superintendent who focused on curriculum and instruction is that background. My mom also taught biology, and so anytime I had a question, she would take me over to the board in the hallway and say, you know, here's how it works. Here's how your blood, you know, goes through your heart or whatever. And so I had that opportunity even as a little child, and it gave me the opportunity to, as I grew and matured, really desired to be a teacher. That was the thing that I cared about the most, was making sure that teaching and learning was first and foremost. And so as a superintendent and former principal, that has been the most important thing for me. And so as I come from another district, Waterford has a good tradition of teaching and learning and has great teachers and wonderful staff members. I've talked to some of your students, and they all say great things about the teachers and staff members. So thank you for having me here tonight.
Our next question will be asked by Trustee Joslin, and then we will proceed in order.
Provide an example of a situation that accurately reflects your leadership style. Then describe your leadership style and explain how you came to embrace it.
Well, the example of my leadership style, which is transformational, it's several put together. So it's transformational, collaborative, and communicative all together. So the example is when I arrived at my district where I am now, the facilities were in rather poor shape. The district had tried several times for a bond issue and been able to pass one. And so we put together a group, and we did a lot of communication and a lot of collaboration. And we worked together, and we formed a facility improvement team and a core team, and we worked from that base. And I used my ability as a communicator through Facebook and Twitter and the website, and I write a blog every week, pretty much every week, and newspaper articles, and those things, along with face-to-face communication, because it's so powerful to communicate with people face-to-face. We went door to door, and those things really built on my leadership style of transformational, collaborative communicator. That combined with my core beliefs of honesty, integrity, and respect and responsibility and caring. Those core beliefs, along with my ability to communicate with the constituencies, really have helped me as a superintendent, and then certainly helped pass the bond issue.
Okay, thank you. Based on your research of the district, how would you go about cultivating a productive relationship with and amongst the Board of Education?
Well, thank you, Joan. Developing productive and collaborative relationships takes hard work and a lot of time. And so it's something we need to invest in, certainly. First of all, I would start out with a base and do face-to-face meetings, committee meetings, and whole group board meetings, similar to professional development. I think one of the things that I would be interested in is having us work together to develop basically a strategy. What is our goal? What are our priorities as a school district? What are the things that we care about today and we're going to care about in 5 and 10 years? So those are the things that really generate bonding. So we all know that teaching and learning is very important. We also know that staff members are very important. It's important to recruit and retain staff members. You can't just recruit and then lose them. It's important to retain them because we have a lot invested in them, and our kids love them. And so those kind of things build that strategic plane that we would build a relationship on and find common ground. So I think certainly collaborating and cooperating, discussing. Currently I'm in a program of dispute resolution with Pepperdine University, and I've learned a lot about mediating and negotiating, and some of those skills certainly would come into effect, I think, as we work together and build that bond and that base for leadership together and work towards student success.
Please describe what your track record is with regard to attracting and retaining school personnel, including instructional staff, when resources are limited.
Well, thank you, Heather. That is the question of the day, for sure. It is very difficult. Many people, I think, probably 10 years ago, if someone came up to me and said, I want to be an elementary teacher, I would have said, well, think again. Today, it's totally different. So what I have done to recruit and retain staff members, first of all, recruiting staff members, I have hired several kids that work for me in the summer. They're going to be teachers. They help out with our summer school. They help out with maintenance. We pay them well enough. We establish, not great, but they're summer college kids. But we establish a bond with those students, and I recruit from within. So our students that are graduating, they know the culture. They know who we are and what we stand for. And they're the ones that are going to come back and I think bless the children of our district. And so that's number one. Number two really is leveraging the relationship you have with your educational association. Your teachers know people. They know people in other districts. Our teachers regularly recruit for us and bring in the best and brightest out of other districts. So that's the second thing that I would do, and probably that's the most important, because those teachers they're trained someplace else, and they've had a chance to do their first couple of years, and then they come over and teach in my district, and they're excellent. And then thirdly, I would say making sure that you have a good track record with colleges, so that they understand that where they are placing their students is going to be a positive environment for them, and that the culture is going to be positive and they're going to be successful. So those would be the three things.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about a situation in which you have brought disparate groups of people together on a difficult issue. How did you personally provide leadership in the situation, and what was the outcome?
Well, thank you, Robert. And he didn't get to wear his shorts today. We were talking about that in the hallway. I felt sorry for you, really. So bringing groups of people with differing ideals together, that is one of the jobs of a superintendent, certainly. And as you work with your constituency, you have staff members and teachers and students and board members and principals. Those things where you bring everyone together, it's very important. So one of the examples I can think of right off the top of my head would be strategic planning. So we worked through, in my district, we worked through the bond process, planning and building, and then the board said, would you create a strategic plan? And so I was pretty excited to get a chance to do that. And I led my district through this, I can't even say it, strategic planning process. And it was a great opportunity to find common ground and really put a value on what we care about. So, which was student success. And so we came up with all sorts of things. One of the things that ended up happening is we added a counselor. We were able to do some teacher appreciation things that we hadn't done before, because we pulled from everyone, every stakeholder, and they said, you need to value your teachers more. You need to work with your children who really are struggling, for emotional reasons. And so those things, along with, of course, the strategic plan is going to have some curriculum and instruction and improvement in your curriculum, all of the curriculum mapping, all of that stuff. Those are givens. But the things that I think made our strategic plan strong was because we pulled from everybody. Everybody had a say, everybody had an opportunity. And it all started with deciding what our mission was and what it was going to be now and what it was going to be into the future.
Please explain how you have improved student achievement in the previous position. Be specific. We are looking to hear about the situation, the objective you set out to accomplish, the actions you took, and the outcomes.
Thank you very much, Mary. Student achievement is the heart of the district, and that is the reason we're all here. That's why your teachers are here. That's why they get up every day. That's why they come with enthusiasm and they love their students. It's about student achievement. They really care about their students, or they wouldn't be here. So, in order to increase student achievement, what we did was we set a base of curriculum mapping. Now that's not a fun task. Any teacher that's ever had an opportunity to do that wouldn't say that's what they want to do on their vacation. But we worked on curriculum mapping. We looked at gaps between first and second grade and fifth and sixth grade and so on. And we really worked together and bridged those gaps, worked at teaching bell to bell, all sorts of things that are top-notch, quality-driven instructional practices. The other thing we did is we really dug deep into data because it's important to put the data out there, and we all analyzed that data. Our teachers had the opportunity to look at it, to say, this is what we need to do, and this is where we need to go. And we work together. This isn't something that your curriculum director, superintendents, or your principals. It's something that everybody works together, goes hand in hand, and we come up with a successful product. And what ended up happening in that district, and it's not instantaneous, it's not going to be tomorrow, but we ended up winning a state award for excellence for our increase in test scores.
Tell us about an experience with collective bargaining and fostering productive relationships with unions.
Thank you, John. One of my favorite things is working with our educational associations and our Teamsters groups. So we have both education associations for our teachers and our custodians, and then for our bus drivers, Teamsters are the representatives. And I really enjoy working with them because it helped me get to know them, and we have a great working relationship. And negotiating contracts, one of the things that we've really worked together to do is to think outside of the box, be creative. Think about things that teachers would really like, but they never got. Maybe it's something that doesn't even cost the district very much. Whether it's a better mentoring program for our new teachers, or whether it's the opportunity to, one of the things our teachers weren't able to wear jeans in the past on a daily basis. And so one of the things we did is we used that as a negotiation strategy. And it's great because if you're teaching first grade or kindergarten, honestly, you're up and down and up and down, and maybe that's the most comfortable thing to wear. And it's a kindergartner doesn't know any different. They like people wearing jeans. That's what they have on. So I think thinking out of the box, thinking creatively, working collaboratively with the Education Association and the Teamsters, we've been able to be successful and settle the contracts, never have a big problem about it, and just really have way better contracts than we did before. And I think our staff are happier and more satisfied because they've had a say And not just in the financial realm, because of course, everybody, finances drive things many times. That's important, but some of those other things are very important, those creative, out-of-the-box ideas.
Okay, what is your approach to improving instruction?
Well, instructional leaders are very important, I think, and the superintendent and the principals, curriculum directors are all instructional leaders. What's important for them is, first and foremost, to get into the classrooms. They need to see what's happening in the classrooms. They need to value what the children are doing and what the teachers have worked so hard to do. And as we support teachers by being in their classrooms, those things that includes supporting would include mentoring, working with mentees, allowing our teachers time to work together collaboratively. A second thing that we would want to do is to make sure that the instructional elements that they have to work with, the curriculum, the textbooks, the computers, whatever it is that they need for their classroom is top-notch. Because we can't afford to do anything less than the best for our students. That's how you attract students, and keep teachers, is by having the best for your students. That's the second thing. The third thing would be to make sure that we work with our teachers in an evaluation process. Right now, as all of you know, evaluation is a big, scary word. And it's scary for everybody. It's scary for principals and superintendents as well as teachers. And when you have new teachers who don't have a lot of experience, or even teachers that are experienced, who all of a sudden have this hanging over their head, I think you have to work with a rubric that's fair and that you collaborate as you go through that process and make sure that the teachers feel supported, because they're the ones that touch our children's lives every day.
Share an example of how you applied a creative or innovative approach to district management or resource generation.
That is a great question, Julie. Resource generation is the part of that I want to talk a little bit about. With resource generation, one of the things that we've done in my district is write a lot of grants. So, some you get and some you don't get. This year I've gotten over $150,000 in grants myself. Our elementary principal has also written several grants, and our high school principal as well. So together, as a leadership team, we really focus on grants. Not only that, we also have focused on allowing our staff and teachers to apply for mini grants. So one of the things we did several years ago was create an opportunity, a cash bash. I'd never heard of it before. We came up with this idea. It's basically a reverse raffle, and we do this with the community, and they all buy tickets, and they have this great fun night, and then we use the funds to have mini grants. So teachers have things that, as you know, they spend their own money for many things in their classroom, and so as far as generating resources, we've been able to put back in thousands of dollars every year back into the classrooms for teachers who say, this is what I really need. I need a listening station because I have children who need this. Osmos, they want Osmos, or robotic things for their second grade classroom. So a lot of great creative things have come out of generating resources that our community has so happily given, and it's given us an opportunity really to come together as a district and focus on generating those resources.
While people may have different ideas about which decisions need to be made, we do agree that some difficult decisions need to be made in Waterford, and that both the process for decision-making and the follow-through will be key. Please share an experience that best illustrates your process for leading a district through a difficult decision, as well as your practices related to follow-through after that decision was made.
Well, thank you, Joan. The instant that I would like to talk about, I spoke a little bit before about the bond issue that we passed. The district where I am had tried several bond issues that had failed, and so we really put together a team and we went after that bond and really communicated face-to-face, door-to-door, worked with the facility improvement team. We met weekly. We worked on priorities. We surveyed people. We surveyed our teachers. We surveyed the community. We communicated with those members of the community. I put things in my newspaper article. I wrote on my blog about what was going on as far as what our needs were. Leaky roofs. I mean, it was awful. I mean, you would be shocked how bad it was. And just getting the community in to see what their kids were going to school in every day. And so as far as decision-making, really negotiating and mediating with our constituency and our staff and our board to make sure that we had a product that was going to pass. We passed our bond issue, raised $30 million, which is not anything like what you're doing, but it was great. It made all the difference in the world. Now when students walk in to tour our schools, they say, this is where I want to go to school. And it's important because they are the leaders of tomorrow, and those are the people that we want to value. And so it was really important. Follow through as far as emails, and I kept track of, because fund issues and construction projects are part of my love next to curriculum and instruction. I made sure that everything went right, and that if there was a construction, that the construction companies and the architects, that they followed through, and we held them accountable. And so we had a great product and a very successful building and renovation project because of that. Mm-hmm.
If you could, please tell us about your experience right-sizing a school district.
Well, the day that I walked into the district where I am now, I knew that there were some concerns financially and as far as right sizing. After some in-depth work, I found that we were not just in a little bit of trouble, but we were going to be one of those deficit districts that are on the news. And so I met with groups of employees, and some individually, depends on how they came. We just scheduled, I actually bought them lunch, so they all came. And we worked together to brainstorm, and many of the employees came back later and said, hey, I thought about this. I thought about some ideas that would really help. We were able to turn the district around. We used grant funds to leverage more employees for our at-risk students. And so we were able to basically move people into at-risk positions that had formerly been in regular positions. Those things and some of the ideas, the best idea that saved the most money other than that was an idea that a custodian gave me. He came in and said, do not ever use my name, do not ever tell anybody that I said this, but this is what you need to do. And I did it, and it saved a ton of money. It was a great idea. And we were able to turn the district around and give our students the learning environment that they needed and not be the headline in tomorrow's newspaper.
Describe your approach to communication. What evidence of this approach will we find when talking with stakeholders from your current district?
Well, communication is essential in a school district. It is what brings students in every day. You've got to communicate the direction of your district to their parents, their grandparents, and the community members. It's essential. So how do I communicate with our stakeholders? One, I had mentioned about writing a column in the newspaper. I do that. I have a blog. I use, we have a website that's tied to Facebook. So I put something on the website, pushes to Facebook, and it pushes straight to my Twitter. The kids all follow Twitter because they know that even before they get the call that says we have a snow day, they can see it on Twitter. So the principals all do Remind as well as Facebook, and some of them do Facebook, some of them do Twitter. We do a weekly e-newsletter, and the elementaries do a bi-weekly e-newsletter. It has everything you ever wanted to know. As a district, we do a quarterly paper newsletter that we send out to all our stakeholders, and so we make sure that we communicate. The other thing that I do is I'm a member of Kiwanis. I regularly talk to people around town, in the grocery store, wherever I am, 24/7. I'm the superintendent, and I represent our district in a positive manner and make sure that anybody who has a question or a comment has an opportunity for me to communicate with them.
Describe your vision of a strong district-wide curriculum program.
Yeah.
Well, Mary, that is the essential. Curriculum is what, and instruction is what drives your district. And so beginning with a curriculum map to make sure that you don't have any gaps, that's the first step. The second step would be, our teachers have a great pedagogy. They come out of college knowing what they need to teach. But as children change, sometimes the way we teach needs to change. And so we need to make sure that we bring in experts on how to teach. And sometimes those experts are right in your own district. Every district has great teachers who would love to share it. And they also have great teachers who are, don't want the limelight. But you always have teachers who are willing to share and who will do professional development sessions. Once a year or so, we do a professional development where we have teachers do mini series basically on technology integration and literacy and all of those things, because literacy and math instruction, that's so important. And you think about little ones who come in, they may not know how to hold a pencil yet, and you're trying to teach them how to read and how to do math. Because what we teach our kindergartners is what we learned probably when I was in school in first grade or so. So curriculum instruction really drives and is the heart of the district and is very important. And so to have a curriculum, basically starting with that map, identifying the gaps, moving forward, using your own experts as well as experts from the outside, really focusing that curriculum on excellency, digging deep for the data, because sometimes you adopt a curriculum and you think it's going to be great. Some salesperson said it was going to be great. I believed them, but that's not necessarily true. And so you've got to be particular and make sure that you make the right choices. And I think it's got to be collaborative. I don't want to pick. We just adopted Lucy Calkins. I don't want to pick Lucy Calkins. I want to make sure that this is something that our teachers are on board with and they're going to be excited about.
Thank you. Leading a school district requires the superintendent to inspire staff members to the highest levels of performance and also hold them accountable. Provide an example of how you have inspired staff members while also holding them accountable.
Well, recognition of staff members is important. And one of the things that our strategic plan helped me understand was how important it was. Recognizing staff members. So we do several things to recognize staff members. We have Teacher of the Year at all our buildings. We do You Make a Difference Award, and we do every month I do superintendent's awards, and that goes to community members as well as staff members and teachers. So those recognition items, those are the big ones. You get a little trophy or a certificate, but those things value what our teachers do. They really work hard, and I think if we can value them more, it's essential. Then the other thing, I think, even small things. Thursday I went around with a bag of Reese's eggs. Who doesn't like Reese's eggs? And they had a little message on them, "You're exactly what we need at Columbia School District," and handed them out to every employee. Made sure that everybody knew that I knew that they were working hard. And all the kids wanted one. I hadn't really thought about that. I was just worried about the teachers and the staff members. But it was an opportunity not only to get into every classroom in the school district, but to make sure that people knew that they were valued and that they were important. So I think that's about inspiring, and some of it is just inspiring people on a daily basis, just appreciating what they do. When we do Teacher of the Month, so we have Teacher of the Year, and then we have Teacher of the Month. It's a column I write for the newspaper as well. And when I put the link to the blog on the website, people are like, "Oh, this is my favorite teacher, and she's so wonderful." And the teachers are like, "I didn't know people felt like that." They know somebody likes them, but they didn't know how much they like them. So I think that helps to inspire. How do you hold people accountable? Well, as we know, the legislature has given us this lovely task of all of our new evaluations. So I think by working collaboratively with the teachers and the staff members and making sure that the evaluations are fair and honest and transparent, that is a way to hold people accountable. And I think that from what I know about the Waterford school staff, I think that you have a great staff, and that it would be very, I don't want to say easy, but I think it would be great to work with them in an evaluative way as well. So,
what is it about this job specifically that appeals to you?
well, Waterford has a tradition of excellence. And as you may have seen in my resume, I live not too far from here. My husband and I were members of the Racquet Club, just not very far from here. And when we did our lifeguard they did this whole nationwide thing where we all had it. Anybody who taught lifeguarding had to come to Waterford if you were from this area. We came to Waterford, and at that time I just thought, oh, this is a great district. There's great people here. We spent a lot of time here. 10 weeks of swimming. It was a long time. And I was in much better shape then. And so I think Waterford from then on, I just really appreciated the school district, and it seems like a silly thing about swimming and being in the area, but when I saw the posting come out, and I wasn't really looking, I had talked to Donna and said, what's going on in the superintendent search arena? And she said, well, Waterford, and I said, I love Waterford. And when I looked at the posting, I saw that about your bond issue and the other things that you value and you put in your posting and your description. And I thought, that's a good match for my skill set. I love my district. I love my board. I love my teachers. I love the kids. I mean, they know me, and I told you they follow me on Twitter. I love where I am, but Waterford would give me an opportunity to make a difference and to collaborate with your district and your teachers who have a tradition of excellence, and really get a chance to come back to Oakland County. My son and his wife are getting ready to have a baby, so they don't live very far from here. And so I just think all of those things, and my skill set, my experience with bond issues and construction, building from ground up K-12 school, doing a huge amount of renovations over the last 5 years. Those things and curriculum development and strategic planning, those things really match well with what you're looking for.
Thank you. And our final question. First of all, we appreciate your interest in this position. Waterford is certainly a great place to be, great parents, great staff, great families, great kids, ultimately. As we wind down, do you have any closing thoughts that you would like to share with us?
Well, as I mentioned before, my parents were teachers. My brother was a teacher. He's a college professor now. My family really valued education. It was something, I didn't just go to school in the winter. I went to summer school as well. Did a lot of great things. And some of that has shaped the way that I look at summers and education. And those things, that passion for education, I think that's something that I can bring to Waterford. Bring my love of education, from academic games to, we have Princess Camp. Who wouldn't want to, what little girl wouldn't want to go to Princess Camp? You know, all those cool things that you can do. To get kids excited about science and math and academics. You know, everybody pretty much loves sports, but that's essential as well. And so I think those things are the things that I can bring to your district, and to be able to partner with your teachers, with the board members in your community would really, I mean, I would love to do that.
Well, we very much appreciate it. As I said, we have 7 people going to interview between tonight and tomorrow, and at that point we'll sign up second round interviews, and if selected, we'll share down and we'll be in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And thank all of you for coming tonight, because I know you probably had better things to do on a beautiful evening like this. Thank you.
Yeah, with that, we'll have a 10-minute recess. If anybody needs water, cookies, stretch, and then we'll have our second camp.
I think I sit down here, I speak Spanish, I speak lots of
I know, I just thinking, is it for Columbia, like on their website, they say it?
I was thinking about that. I know I have this thin spot in my.
She's like,
Our high school.
that sounds like one high school.
Sounds like one.
I love it. I would like to sit back there, I can just come up and point.
Yeah.
John says thinner than mine, but it's.
I'm sorry.
Making a ordinance about using the camera. Yeah, but the camera's still on, so we're already videotaping still. And that's what I
That's exactly.
So I'm thinking,
I just wanted to see, I just wanted to see you paying attention. And you were. Columbia School District. Oh, that's up.
yeah, I had to Google.
Yeah.
You had to Google, find out where it is.
Yeah.
You could ask me. I know a lot. lot of stuff.
I bet you do.
So one of them. No, we're not going to report tonight.
You did that? Teachers are good people. Oh, yeah. Well, now we hear the superintendent.
I am. Because some sign it and some don't. Oh, perfect, thank you. Do you have one to turn in? Oh, you're facing yourself, okay.
No, I mean, just.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. But, you know, you can't take everything. That doesn't mean anything. Now we're just not.
Yeah, looks great.
I've had a meeting where it was full of doctors. She did. It's just education.
I appreciate her
There's so many
thoroughness and then
doctors
she
that
added
want
this
to
to the
break.
body.
I don't want to. Next thing.
Yeah, I appreciate it too. Oh, yeah. I know, right? They're totally honest. I know.
Perfect.
How are you? Hi, are you ready? Please, yeah, thank you. Hi. Oh, you said that's Terry. How are you? Yeah, the same.
I get up Franklin's at 0 hour here, so I start my day. Oh, wow. Okay. Elementary doesn't start till 8:30.
Long day.
Long day. Very thankful I was so.
Didn't it seem like it was longer than one extra day off? No, it was just Friday.
I know.
But today felt like going back several days off. Yeah, it's gonna be tough from here on out. Supposed to be in the 60s, I guess. Yeah, everybody's gonna wanna be done soon. Sarah and I had fun looking at those cars.
At the what? Oh, those cars. That's hilarious. I was sitting there crying. And, I mean, I'm sure he would giggle at any of them.
Any of them. Any of them.
You know what made me laugh out loud? You're literally
How are you doing?
I'm trying to remember. Oh, I know, we remember an Easter egg. That's what it was, when they were at my house.
Over there, right?
We didn't even do it this year. I feel so bad. And let me tell you, I set up the egg hunt for these boys. They are still all around my house. They haven't even done it yet.
Oh, my kids looked for theirs. The night before, I said, "You guys want
I can think of which one gives you a big
Patrick's 21 now. Patrick said, "Tell Luke whatever he wants to." And Luke said, "Yeah, sure."
well, we
So
play,
I hid my head around the house. I was doing it.
Oh, okay.
The living room was,
Yeah, we go all over.
they're crawling around on the floor looking for them.
So we
It's
had,
fun to watch.
we do the, I've always done a scavenger hunt for the cider basket. So we still did that. We did that.
Like they have to get clues from here and there.
Yeah, so they have to follow the clues.
So they did do that.
They did do that, and then we kind of had to leave, so
We
it
do
wasn't
twofold.
really all their fault, but.
We do twofold. So we have like a table read and we'll have like in the living room, but then we do candy with like plastic activity. Those we go like first. Those are in your shoes. Like
Yeah.
you're going to use and you're not going to touch again until.
Oh yeah, we'll find
Like
some
you'll be fine
for the next.
forever.
It's funny how everybody does it.
I think if everyone's set, take your seats, we're gonna have our next candidate.
It's amazing kids don't figure it out sooner.
Our second interview of the evening is with Dr. Catherine Koss. Dr. Koss, how are you?
Nice to put a name and a face together. Good evening.
All right.
Welcome to Waterford. Thank you for being with us today. We'll get the questions underway. I think you probably know we're going to kind of do it a round robin format. I'll start and we'll continue to go around. Everyone will ask questions. And so with that, we'll start off. If you could please tell us what has prepared you to be the next superintendent of the Waterford School District.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me tonight. It's an honor to be before you, and I look forward to getting to know you a little bit better, and then vice versa. I will jump right in because Donna has said at 7:40 I am done. So with that, I think there are a number of elements, but the first one would be experience. So I sit as a current superintendent in a town called Wyandotte. It's 20 minutes south of Detroit. It was founded by the Wyandotte Indian tribe. And like Waterford and all the lakes, we sit on the river. So it's not uncommon to have fishing boats and freighters, and we even have a crew team. And the district where I am right now has 10 schools, three of which are center program based. So I think similar to like Kingsley, Montgomery maybe here. And the others serve just under 5,000 students. And in partnering with my current board, we have been able to do things like have a 16.5% fund balance, bring in over 200 students in the last 4 years. We've been able to pass bonds to maintain our facilities and make sure the boilers are in good working order and create just a very positive feeling. And so I think about the things that I've been able to do in that role would definitely help me work shoulder to shoulder with you to move Waterford forward. I think about my passion. I think about my energy, my dedication, character, integrity, and most of all, I'm a mom. And so I live with 3 children who come home and tell me about things that happened in their school day. And that's helpful for me because I want the best for each and every child. And so seeing it through their eyes makes, I think, me be better at making decisions to drive our district forward.
Our next question will be asked by Trustee Johnson. We'll proceed in order.
Provide an example of a situation that accurately reflects your leadership style. Then describe your leadership style and explain how you came to embrace it.
So a leader makes decisions, develops implementation plans, and then inspires or motivates others around to behold that vision. So I'm going to draw upon an experience when I was an assistant superintendent in Farmington Public Schools. I was there for 8 years. That district had 14,000 students when I started in 21 campuses. And what came to mind when you were asking that was, like Waterford, we were members of the IA Academy, and I think we had maybe 20 slots at most. And so year after year, I would watch over 200 families try to be involved with the IA. So after the 3rd year, I said, we are not serving our families well if there's this many that don't get what they perceive they want. So I got together a group of parents, counselors, teachers, administrators, and we began looking at it. And things like, could we get more spots? And that didn't work out. So then we looked at other alternatives. And fast forward, we were able to create our own school within a school and have our own international baccalaureate program. So we went through the authorization process, which was no easy task, but we also got staff buy-in along the way because we needed teachers to reach this level of rigor and go to trainings in the summer. And through keeping the board apprised, they gave it their blessing. And that first year, over 125 students were in the program. And 8 years later, I'm no longer there, and the program is thriving. So as a leader, that says that just because I left, it kept going, which meant it really was serving the needs of the families there. So that's an example of my leadership style, which I would describe probably as strategic in nature, meaning I'm keeping abreast of the day-to-day interactions, but also looking at the future. So how do we continue to leverage what we have and bring families in and meet the needs of the children we serve?
Based on your research of the district, how would you go about cultivating a productive relationship with and amongst the Board of Education?
That's a great question, because I think that would be the first thing I would work on. Meaning, research has showed if we don't work as a group of 8 efficiently and effectively, we're not bringing all we can bring to this organization. And so when I think about that, I'd like to first and foremost sit down with each of you and find out why you give so much of your time to do this, what your passions are, where you think Waterford should be going. In going to MSAB events, Donna has said, if one person changes in this group of 8, it could be a superintendent, it could be a board member who comes new to the board, the dynamics change. And so we need to kind of take a step back and then learn how we're going to work together again. And they offer workshops, and I would work with Bob or whomever here to say what's the right fit for us as a group. So we know what to expect, we know how we're going to approach our business, we know how we're going to communicate with one another and move the district forward. So that would be the short term. The long term would be communicating, so that you have the information you have when you come to a board meeting, You have the information you have, so when you're in line at Costco and somebody asks you something, you know how to respond, you're not caught off guard. And we're working as a true team.
Excellent, thank you very much.
Please describe what your track record is with regard to, attracting and retaining school personnel, including instructional staff, when resources are limited.
When I first came to Wyandotte, we did not hire teachers or any other staff with a master's degree. So a bachelor's was as high as we could go, and that was for financial reasons. But it was hard to attract teachers. And so we kind of put our heads together. Of course, there are enrollment fairs and there are job fairs, and the hard part was not losing them to districts who were paying more. So in doing some research about Waterford, I found out that something I think both communities have in common is this tight-knit, family-based community. In Wyandotte, generations just keep coming back. And so what we tried to do was leverage that and say, okay, we know we have some graduates in teaching positions. There's a strong family draw back to Wyandotte. Could we reach out to them, even if they're 2 years down the road, and start talking to them about positions we have available and where we see our staffing needs? And that was unique in my situation because of a strength that the current community that I am in has. I think it would be similar to here, but that's an example of maybe thinking outside the box and trying to leverage what are some things that really, really work here. I'm glad to say things changed, and now we're able to reward those staff who stuck with us and who were so committed, and that has really turned the tide. So I think we would have to go beyond creative measures, but there are ways to bring qualified teachers here and then retain them. That's the other part, is how do you keep them and entice them and have them have their needs met so they can raise their families and not do 3 jobs and be part of this family.
Tell us about a situation in which you have brought disparate groups of people together in a difficult issue. How did you personally provide leadership in the situation, and what would the outcome?
When I first got to Wyandotte, there was a situation where we had 4 elementary schools piloting 3 different ELA curriculums. And I'm sure at the time there was a good reason for that. I'm sure at the time there was a thinking. The problem that emerged to me, or for me, or maybe I should say challenge, the challenge emerged was that when we had to make a decision as a district, there were 3 different camps all in favor of the own resource they had been using. Because they'd been using it, they liked it. So we had to make a decision. I felt it was best if we had buy-in from the teachers. So from the 4 schools, we had teams of lower L and upper L and the administrators selected from each school. I facilitated that meeting because it actually was a series of meetings because I knew that was going to be a really hard decision to make. I knew that for them, being able to put themselves in somebody else's shoes and see it objectively was going to be a challenge. So the first meeting went nothing like I thought it was going to go. I thought I could get them to easily bend or see a different way, and in fact, they probably got more resistant to the process. So I had to kind of back up, and I met with the administrators, and we developed a different plan of attack. And it was one where we could take emotion out of it, and we looked at best practice and research and created a rubric. and said which of these curriculums truly aligns with depth of knowledge, best practice, the essential standards, while supporting teachers in what they need. So I'm happy to say the second meeting went much better. The third meeting, we were able to get teams from all different schools together to go through the rubrics, and in the end result, we were able to make a decision, and then there was buy-in from all 4 schools. So it wasn't one person saying, this is what we're going to use. It was a team of teachers going back to each school saying, this is what we're going to use and why we believe in it.
Please explain how you have improved student achievement in a previous position. Be specific. We are looking to hear about the situation, the objective you set out to accomplish, and the actions you took, and the outcomes.
So I wanna talk a little bit about our high school science program. Our high school science program, even though the standards were adopted in 2015, they had 2 years and really believed they had changed their practices to align with NGSS. So in looking at test data, it became clear we were not hitting the mark yet. And in that case, it was bringing in representatives from our ISD, which is Wayne Mesa, the equivalent of Oakland Schools here. And so we had them come in and work with our teachers. We had the teachers go and visit other schools. And it was a situation where they weren't not aligning their practices because they didn't want to. It's just they needed more information and more knowledge. And so next year, we are set to begin with a new course sequence in our high school. They had a year of professional development in curriculum writing in order to prepare for that. And I am excited because our students are going to now be aligned with our middle school program, and it's going to make differences that we've seen initially, but I think after a year or 2 years or 3 years, it's really going to take off.
Thank you. Tell us about an experience with collective bargaining and fostering productive relationships with unions.
When I was the principal of Athens High School, there were 13 grievances that had hit my desk the first year. And I thought, this is crazy. And so a lot of work went into working with not only our school representation, but also the president of the teachers union, and most of it was from teachers. And so my goal was to not have grievances. My goal was to have them sit down and talk with me and figure it out together and not have to get to that grievance process. So by year 2 and 3, I think I had 2 grievances the next year, and then I had no grievances the third year, which demonstrated to me I was on the right track, that we were solving things in a productive way. When I was in Farmington as an assistant superintendent, I was on the negotiating team, and we used interest-based negotiations, and those at times were quite lengthy, but we were able to start with teachers, and then at that time went through food service, maintenance, bus, I'm missing one, paras, and secretaries. And so that was a bigger organization. Attorneys were involved, and I was somebody who would bring ideas forward to say maybe this would work when we got to sticking points. So then fast forward to my current role, where I am the chief negotiator, and I sit down with our union groups. We have a contract through 2020. We have a wage reopener next year. I've negotiated 12 contracts with them, and It's been very positive. It's a situation where sometimes it's not always, it doesn't look the same, but I try to keep them equal. And as an example I'll give you is, our secretaries, for example, were very interested in having President's Day off as a paid holiday. The maintenance staff wanted a percentage increase. And so we could cost both those things out. And even though in the end, the secretaries ended up with another paid holiday and the maintenance employees ended up with a percentage increase, they represented about the same dollar amount overall. And so we approach it as we want to treat our union groups similar so that one group is not perhaps negotiating first and getting the lion's share of the pie, but yet it's similar. And that's created a very positive morale. It's caused a very proactive experience. I was meeting with teachers last week to talk about something they want to do with professional development, and they chose to not pursue it anymore at this point in time, but to wrap it in with our contract negotiations next year. So even though we're not in a negotiating year, I'm still meeting, I'm still talking, and trying to, I guess, meet their needs and have everybody walk away with a win-win. It's important to me with my board that I let them know where we are in that process. So before any negotiations start, I meet with them to get some parameters so that I'm not giving away the farm. And so we establish parameters and then I update them. Sometimes there's some twists and turns, and I will meet with them in closed session and give them updates, give them cost examples, and get their direction. And so then when we're bringing a TA to the table for all of you to consider, you will have information ahead of time. You will have given me marching orders about what I could do and where I should stay away from. So that's worked very effectively.
Thank you. What is your approach to improving instruction?
And again, this is situational. So I'll tell you this example. It may work here, it may not. So I turn to research a lot, and there's a researcher named John Hattie. And John Hattie talks about what instructional techniques give you the most bang for your buck with student achievement. And really, the core theory there is the stronger the instruction, then the better the student achievement. And one of another strategy research has said is effective is professional learning communities. And I think about when I was trained as a math teacher, a high school math teacher, I didn't look at data. I didn't talk to my neighbor about the students who got it or didn't get it. We talked about what chapter are you on. And so in thinking about how to effectively grow professional learning communities in Wyandotte, I knew that it was going to be a systems change and a cultural change. So the systems change was we need teams of teachers to own student achievement. The cultural change was teachers needing to work together. And it started with coaching administrators so they could work with their teacher teams. It was then bringing teams of leadership from the teachers with us on professional development. It was focusing professional development with our ISD and how they could help us. And so we are in year 4. It's exciting to sit back and kind of be a fly on a wall in some of these meetings and see the transition go from principals leading conversations about what instructional practices need to change to now teachers starting to talk about that themselves and coming up with ideas and being passionate and energized about how they were going to reach each and every learner. So professional learning communities is what sticks out when I think about improving instruction.
or resource generation?
So our current funding is the very lowest. We're optimistic about the governor's proposed funding levels, but it's created challenges, and it's no different probably than the challenges you have. So we looked and did an assessment, and our safety and security measures, we had some built in, but we needed more. And so we applied for the Michigan State Police grant, and we're able to create a 2-buzzer system to let visitors into our schools. It used to be we had a 1-buzzer system where somebody would stand in the rain and buzz, and the secretary would let that person in, but that person would come in and could go anywhere in the school. And so it wasn't very safe. So now with this grant, we have visitors come directly into the main office and then get buzzed into the school. So it added another layer of security for our students and our staff. So grants, that would be an example of a grant. I worked with Wayne County on an enhancement millage. This was something where County ISD looked at opportunities to raise funds for all the county districts. And so we had a group of superintendents meet with the leadership of Wayne County ISD and present a proposal for an enhancement millage. It took 2 times to have that approved, but through some hard work of all of us together, we were able, my district, it gets, I think, $1.6 million each year for 6 years. And that was something that our county did not have. So working with our ISD, able to bring some more funds. Last but not least, I found that our community is extremely supportive. We have a large company, BASF, which is very, we don't make the chemicals, we make them better. That was their slogan. And they very much want to support STEM initiatives. And so they gave us a wonderful grant to get our middle school robotics team started. And I'm very grateful for opportunities like that. So those have worked where I am. I'm sure there's other possibilities, but it's trying to leverage resources and meet needs maybe and see where there's a good fit.
While people may have different ideas about which decisions need to be made, we agree that some difficult decisions need to be made in Waterford, and that both the process for decision-making and follow-through will be key. Can you please share an experience that best illustrates a process for leading a district through a difficult decision, as well as your practices related to follow-through after a decision was made?
The K-3 reading law was one that really caused some angst with our elementary teachers as well as our elementary leaders. And when you think about the statewide reading average for K-3 being 44%, we have work to do. I know Waterford's is ahead of that, and that's exciting to see. But in my own district, it was before professional learning communities had kind of taken root officially, and so the kindergarten teachers would pass their students on to the first grade teachers and say, kind of, well, good luck. And then first grade would go to second grade, third grade, and the accountability was just hard. So part of the law said we had to have individual reading instruments in place, or IRIPs. And so we began a process to say, what are those going to look like? Who's going to use them? How do we know if our students are making progress? Year 2 was a little bumpy. We came out of year 2 saying we need a better way to assess students more quickly. And WEA works okay, but is there any way we could DRA or IRI these students so that we get feedback more quickly and can put steps in place? And so that was part of our professional development plan this year. And what I have seen is teachers transitioning to good practice versus doing something state mandated. And I believe if the state waved a magic wand and say you don't have to think about third grade reading law anymore, those good practices would still stay in place because they believe what they're doing for their students. Now, the difficult decision was, it's state mandated. How do you get buy-in to something that's unfunded? How do you get buy-in to something that maybe doesn't mean anything initially? And so stepping back and helping them see, we're not doing this because it's state mandated, we're doing this because it's just good for our young learners.
Thank you very much.
You could please tell us about your experience right-sizing a school district.
I don't know if there's anything more painful than doing that, and I know that you have experience with that. When I was in Farmington, we had 21 schools initially, 14,000 students. When I left, we had 11,000 and it was being projected to 10. I was asked to chair a committee to make a recommendation to the board about how to right-size the district. And so I partnered with a facilitator from Oakland Schools, and we had a community group of educators, parents. We even had some high school students on that committee, and we brought in architects to talk about the state of each facility. We had people come in and talk about how many students a current classroom could have, or if we had enough bathrooms, or things like that. And so through about a year of work, we were able to come up with a few recommendations. Grosse Pointe is going through this right now, and it's just painful because no one wants their school to close. So ultimately, the board approved 4 elementary schools to close and 2 district office sites to close. And I think my naiveness was, okay, the hard work is done, but that was just the beginning, because you have redistricting to do. And an example is, if you have students maybe go to one side and a line through the middle, and then the other students go here, what about bus times? Is it better to have the line go this way and have students go north, or have students go this way? So redistricting was huge. And then you have the families who are torn apart because their friends that they've grown up with have always gone to school. Do you make some exceptions for them as you're in this transition? There are resources like the media centers in the elementary schools. How do we divide those 4 sets of resources up? What about all the desks? What about the smart boards? And so then it becomes sort of a logistical feat of how do you best utilize the resources now from those shuttered schools. Then the question became, what do we do with them? Because once a site is shuttered for 3 years, I think it's 3 years, you'd have to bring it back up to code if you open it up again. But our enrollment was such, we knew that wasn't going to happen. And so we ended up demolishing the 4 elementary schools, but that's a very emotional thing for people who grew up and went to those schools, or whose father did a mural, and it's gut-wrenching. Now, was it the right thing to do? Absolutely. When you think about saving $1 million a year from closing one school, times 4, and then add maybe $500,000 from the administrative sites, it was absolutely the right thing to do. And we looked at the enrollment projections, it wasn't going to come back. But it is probably the hardest thing I think any community can go through.
Thank you.
Describe your approach to communication. What evidence of this approach will we find when talking with stakeholders in your current district?
So I'll start with, I don't think you can ever over-communicate. And sometimes, especially in this day and age, people are busy and they might not see an email, they might not see a text, and it's hard to keep everybody on the same page. So I talked about communication with you, I think, in a different question. So I'm going to focus more on communicating with the staff, communicating with parents, communicating with students. I find that with parents, sometimes Facebook is more attractive. And so some of our parents will go to Facebook to get information even before going to a district website. I can't tell you how many calls we get, well, I saw it on Facebook. And while sometimes what's on Facebook is accurate, sometimes it isn't. And so it's getting the right information out and working with families to know how are they used to getting information or used to working with staff. So could it be for staff going to staff meetings? I meet with staff members one-on-one. I meet with staff members and their PLCs. I meet with our curriculum leaders. It really is kind of an open flow of information, because if I know what they're experiencing, I can then better serve them. With our parents, some are on Facebook, some are on Twitter, some are on Instagram, some are on all three. We looked at MyStar and parent portal data and how often parents are accessing that. And so, is that an opportunity to push some information, whereas a parent might not see it somewhere else? Perhaps. I know that Coffee with Keith is done here. I would like to reach out to the community that same way. I have come to find out short video clips that provide information behind the scenes, sometimes help parents understand. Snow days is a beautiful example. We hit our 7th snow day and everybody was up in arms about what does this mean? Are we going to school in June? What's going to happen? So I could get the word out very easily in a quick video. At this point in time, we know that there's some forgiveness on the doorstep. So right now we're not going to be going until June 30th. Students, I found that that's a very interesting avenue because they are not afraid to give me feedback. My own children, I have 3 children who are teenagers, and they can't believe I have over 1,400 followers on Twitter. I'm like, Mom, how did you do that? And sometimes students are appropriate. Dr. Cost, it's really bad outside. You should not have school tomorrow. Sometimes they have gone to places of being inappropriate. And so I followed up with them too in a teachable moment of, you may not like your boss someday, but you can't blast your boss on social media. You can disagree, but do it appropriately. And so actually I've been able to stay in touch with students in quite a unique way through social media, which is something I wouldn't have done 5 years ago. And that's been positive because I know when things are, last year was a year of walkouts, student-led walkouts. I learned how important to them it was to have that voice, and their avenue to getting to me was through social media. Some came and sat down and talked to me, but most were pleading their case. Communication is something that I think is very, very important. I think the only other group that I've not mentioned yet are our community leaders. I believe that a strong school district and a strong city governance can really move a community forward. So I would want to meet with or find out how to communicate with city leaders, faith-based leaders, the volunteer groups that help so much and support students.
Describe your vision of a strong district-wide curriculum program.
So we've talked about PLCs. That is a mechanism that that can be used to make sure that a 3rd grader in one school is learning the same thing a 3rd grader in another school is, or a 7th grader in social studies is learning the same thing across town a 7th grader in social studies is. And that is wonderful. The other component of a strong curriculum is that They're tied to the essential standards that the state has dictated. They're also aligned vertically so that you don't have repetition. We never have enough time to teach what we need to teach. And so we can't have a 5th grader learning the same thing an 8th grader is. So making sure there's vertical articulation and that we have our standards aligned is very, very important. I'll also follow that with assessments that's aligned to the curriculum, because if we don't know how our students are doing, we can't go back and revise that curriculum. We can't go back and revise what we've taught. So that's an important piece of that as well.
Leading a school district requires a superintendent that can inspire staff members to the highest level of performance and also hold them accountable. Provide an example of how you have inspired staff members while also holding them accountable.
So as a superintendent, delegation is very important because there's only one of me. And so when I hear you read that question, I think about our principals, because really our principals are the ones setting the targets, working with teachers day in and day out. I would also broaden that, besides principals, then our maintenance supervisor, our nutrition services supervisor, our HR supervisor, because those are the people that are going to go and make the difference. There's one of me, I can't be everywhere. So in thinking about inspiring them, I'm going to come back to our negotiations work, because that just is hard. They know, though, what's important. They know where the biggest sticking points are. And so if I were to meet with them and we were to prioritize things from their standpoint, what would make the biggest difference? What changes can we make in your departments or your schools? Then getting a list from the employee groups. You know, what are some barriers? What are some things you run into? And we can match them up. I can then work with those district leaders to address the needs of their departments and schools, which can be very inspiring. When you have somebody leading something they didn't think was possible, that is exciting for them to see that change come about. In our benefits, we started offering an HSA. No one knew what an HSA was. No one knew. But it can be a powerful tool for savings in your health account. And that touched every employee. So our benefits person who fell under the umbrella of HR was kind of new to getting out and saying, this is what this could do for you. But yet and she was kind of reluctant to hosting all these sessions, but we rehearsed it, we went through it, but then seeing her get in front of people and give them information they wanted was very inspiring. And so then she was able to do that herself the next time through when people were choosing the benefit plans. So delegation is probably the key there, because there's not enough of me to do that good work.
What is it about this job specifically that appeals to you?
I spent a long time thinking about if Waterford was right. I spent a long time wondering if I had the right skill set to come here. No district is perfect. They aren't. I am very content in my own district. I love where I am. I love what I do. But I feel as though Waterford offers me a chance to make a bigger difference. I can come back to Oakland County. I can work with a district that impacts a greater number of students. Relationships have always been a key for me in being able to develop strong relationships. I believe my ability to do that with each and every one of you, then in turn do it with our leaders, can help move Waterford forward. There are so many things. The community pride is amazing. What Keith has done and the leaders before him, there's good momentum, and I want to keep that going.
So our final is, obviously, we appreciate your time being with us today. As we wind this down, do you have any closing thoughts that you would like to share with us?
So in my travels, every career change I have made was to take another step. I feel as though this would be my last step. My children, I have 3 14-year-olds at home. I have Blake, Katie, and Samantha. There's a lot of gray hairs here because they're triplets. But they are going into high school. I am looking for a place to come and stay and be for a long time. I would love that to be Waterford, and we'll see if this pans out. But I'm grateful for your time. I think anytime you do this, you learn about yourself as well as your community. So I wish you well in taking your next step. Thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you very much as well.
It's impressive to have so many people in the audience, but nerve-wracking. Thank you, everybody. They're awesome.
With that, we're going to have a 20-minute recess now, so we'll start back at 8 o'clock for our next applicant. There's cookies.
No, I have a
Well, I think that's an invasion of our privacy. Yeah, I don't think that's right. I think Dr. Hearn should turn it off. Maybe I'll turn it off. Oh, Dan doesn't.
I made it. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I know I was over and
Applied for, and we received 3 competitive grants from the state of Michigan and that brought in close to $600,000 in 2018 and 2019, and these are to help offset some of our general cost funds in the areas of competency-based education, safety, and our CTE programs. The 4th initiative, and the one I will expand on, is school of choice, because I believe Waterford needs to have these discussions soon as well. I know you have school of choice for kindergarten, but you may want to consider expanding. We at least need to talk about it because there's a lot of different things happening with the declining enrollment. Anyway, in our neighborhood, we have a $17 million budget. $4 million of our revenue is due to 500 school of choice students from 20 different school districts. We have the reputation of being an outstanding school district, so our school of choice numbers kind of confirm that. When I led the district through the strategic planning process, it was very interesting because the community actually endorsed school of choice at that time, and they added one key word to our vision statement. It's our goal to create an exemplary destination school district. So the word destination was significant because it basically endorsed school choice. So to promote school of choice in Armada, we spend our advertising budget on a summer billboard that's on I-69. We also have a commercial that runs on TV for 2 weeks on WDIV Channel 4. And this same commercial actually runs before every movie all year long in 14 movie theaters over at the Chesterfield AMC. So our school of choice numbers speak for themselves. In the last few years, the percentages have been good. Percentages of school of choice in Armada has gone from 25 to 28% over the last few years. So currently about 28% of our student population is school of choice.
Thank you. While people may have different ideas about which decisions need to be made, we agree that some difficult decisions need to be made in Waterford, and that both the process for that decision making and the follow-through will be key. Can you please share an experience that best illustrates your process for leading a district through a difficult decision, as well as your practices related to the follow-through after the decision is made?
Sure. So when the shooting in Parkland, Florida took place in February 2018, it shook our school community to the core. It was the first school shooting played out on social media, and it was gut-wrenching watching all the videos. So again, my office began receiving a high volume of phone calls and emails from parents wanting to know, what are we going to do to improve school safety? Recommendations coming in were install metal detectors, staff should carry guns, we need community resource officer. So with all these different opinions coming in, I decided to have a community safety forum. When we did that, 85 community members showed up. And after gathering their suggestions that evening, I informed the community that I would do the same process with staff. And then I would have a follow-up meeting to inform everyone what, if anything, we were going to change. Well, we did make some safety changes. We made 3 safety changes. We trained 9 staff members, including myself, to be certified instructors for the Alice Active Shooter Training Program. And we did hire an armed resource officer for the first time in school history. And this past November, the entire Armada staff went through the Alice Safety Protocol. And just last month, we went through scenario training where we utilized Nerf guns. Soon, I'll be hosting another safety forum meeting to update the community where we're at, as well as solicit ideas for continuous improvement. I also kind of want to point out we were a little bit ahead of the curve in the safety area. Prior to the Parkland shooting, we passed the bond issue, which included funding for secured entrances at our elementary and middle schools. That has allowed community and parent traffic to go through the main office. The way our buildings were designed, you could just walk right into the school. Now you have to walk through the main office. So those 2 initiatives were completed in the summer of 2018.
Thank you very much. Could you please tell us about your experience right-sizing a school district?
Yes. So due to declining enrollment, we've been right-sizing our school district for several years. When I first began my superintendency, we had 110 teachers and 13 administrators. Currently, we have 90 teachers and 10 administrators. We were able to reduce most of the positions through attrition, but we did have to lay off 2 teachers and 1 administrator to get to our current staffing levels. Another thing I did was make the district more efficient. We have 3 secondary schools. We have a 6 through 8 middle school. We have a 9 through 12 high school and a 9 through 12 math and science academy. When I took over, we were on a site-based education model, and all 3 of these buildings had a different schedule. Our middle school had a 7-period day. Our high school was on 5-period day with a trimester, and our math and science academy had a 3-hour block in the morning and a 3-hour block in the afternoon. So after a year of assessing programs and working with staff, we moved the secondary to be on all one schedule. So currently, we're on a 6-period trimester format, but we're a little different than a true trimester because we have our students take the core courses all 3 trimesters. But it does allow them to have more electives. What this did was help us align our buildings. It made our staffing more efficient, and we were able to actually share staff between buildings now, and that saved thousands of dollars. But it also improved our high school academic achievement by adding more hours of core course instruction.
Describe your approach to communication. What evidence of this approach will we find in talking with stakeholders in your current district?
Okay. So my approach to communication is to be as transparent as possible and inform the community of our many events. I have an open door policy, and if an individual or parent has a concern, I'm always willing to talk to them as long as they've gone through the proper communication channel of communication. Some of the communication formats that we utilize in the district include our website, Facebook pages, district newsletter, and Twitter. So, if you were to talk to stakeholders in my community, several of them may refer to me as Supermuzz, which is my Twitter handle. I believe many of them would also say that I'm visible at district events and that I'm very accessible. I originally created the Supermuzz Twitter handle so students would feel comfortable communicating with me. It's been very successful. In fact, I have hundreds of students from other school districts that follow me as well as and Armada students. It's a very entertaining read during the snowy evenings in the winter. One of my tweets this past winter had over 37,000 views, and I didn't even sing. It was just words. So, but you know, It is helpful, and during the school year, I utilize it to tweet out good things that are happening in the district.
Describe your vision of a strong district-wide curriculum program.
So my vision for a strong district-wide curriculum program includes that we incorporate 21st century skills into our instructional model. I want students to work collaboratively and be able to speak and defend their work in public and their thinking. These concepts should be introduced at the elementary level and built upon throughout middle and high school. For example, Armada's elementary students participate in something we call Genius Hour. This is where students are given an assignment and they're encouraged to be problem solvers. They have to do design challenges and they have to present their findings to their peers. We build on this throughout the middle and high school years as our students compete in such organizations as OSA, First Robotics, and the Business Professionals of America. So the curriculum should also be cohesive from grade to grade and aligned with state and national standards. In addition, curriculum is more than just covering content. I believe it should not limit students, and it needs to consider the students' goals and integrate technology and career education seamlessly. I believe it should be rigorous for all students, and at the secondary, it should have multiple options that would be maybe in alignment with their career interest if possible. I would like to see every student that graduates be college or career ready. And finally, I would like to see a curriculum that can provide multiple college credits during their high school years.
Thank you. Leading a school district requires a superintendent to inspire staff members to the highest levels of performance and also hold them accountable. Provide an example of how you have inspired staff members while also holding them accountable.
So our primary focus is teaching and learning. I've always believed in a collaborative approach. There are a lot of college degrees and experiences in our business, and I welcome all ideas to improve our education system. So our administrators and teaching staff, they develop individual staff goals each year, and they're held accountable through the evaluation process. Early in my superintendency, I tasked the evaluation committee of administrators and teachers to come up with a teacher evaluation model. This process actually took several years, but we wanted to come up with a program that wasn't a gotcha tool, but rather a tool that improved both staff and student growth. So Armada now utilizes the committee's recommendation, which is a Danielson evaluation tool. Many school districts stress over the 25% of teacher evaluation being based on student growth and assessment data, but we work very hard in Armada to make that a positive experience.
What is it about this job that specifically that appeals to you?
So I'm interested in Waterford because I want to return to a larger school district such that I can positively affect more students and staff lives. When the superintendent vacancy was posted, I was excited because I've always had positive experiences when visiting your school for our son's sporting events, or Armada's robotics competitions, or just interacting with members of the Waterford community in general. When the superintendent selection criteria came out, based on the community feedback, I became even more excited because I believe I'm a good fit for the leader that you are seeking. Then I watched several of your past board meetings online, and I saw multiple positives that made me want to apply. I saw 7 board members, although having different ideas on certain procedures, be very passionate about the education that happens in the Waterford School District. Also, I saw the spirit of Brian Whiston alive and well in Waterford as several community members went to Lansing to lobby for public funding and public education. I thought that was fantastic. So I can work well within this environment, and I would love the opportunity to be the superintendent of the Waterford School District.
As we wind down, first of all, we just want to tell you how much we appreciate your interest in this position. Thank you. Waterford is a great community. You can tell by our turnout of staff and parents and community members. Care very deeply. As we wind down, do you have any closing thoughts you'd like to share with us?
Yes, I'd just like to leave a closing statement. Again, thank you for having me this evening. I believe I'm a good candidate because I have 7 years of successful and highly effective superintendent experience in Armada. That's not just my opinion, that's my opinion of the school board. I'm a key reason behind the transformation of our district becoming one of the finest in the state. In Armada, I have collaboratively worked with 2 superintendents and 30 school board members during my 23-year career in Armada. My personality and leadership skills have allowed the district to have great labor relationships, even during difficult financial times. I have the trust and respect of the board and staff at every level, as well as the students and parents I've worked with over the years. I'm going to bring a collaborative administrative model and lead with positivity, which I believe is much needed in Waterford. No other candidate in the state can bring you the 7-year measurable track record that I can bring for increasing student achievement. Certainly, I did not do this by myself. But I did create a collaborative working environment. I provided the leadership, and I empowered all staff to allow it to happen. So my background is business, and I believe that's a positive. I completely understand that you cannot teach students like a business, but you can run a district with business principles, such as the customer comes first, do it right the first time, continuously improve, and leave the business in better shape than when you arrived. So I've done this in Armada, and I now want to do it for a larger school district. I very much want to be a part of the Waterford community and be the next superintendent. I'm going to leave you, if you'd like, with my 90-day plan of action, and I want to thank you for allowing me to share my story. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So you know, we have 7 candidates we're interviewing. One more tonight, 3 tomorrow. And at that point, we will decide on candidates to bring back for a second interview next week. If selected, then I'm sure we'll do that.
All right, well, thank you. Again, thank you very much.
So nice to meet you. Thank you so much.
So we'll have a 10-minute recess, and then actually our next interview is scheduled at 8:55. So about 15 minutes.
And then I'll be here. Turn right out of here, and you'll see it right there. So it'll be on your left. Turn right out of here. and you'll see it. She wasn't saying, and then tomorrow, like, I will get, and he was like, I'll be in the building. But I yeah, I'm gonna try and watch it. Well, I'm gonna watch it tomorrow night, and people have already made, and I assume they will decide to apply for the second. So I think that's unfortunately, I'm not missing my
Oh, 3-4 days. Perfect.
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
It's just a terrible idea. I think come
Yeah.
No, it's crazy. I could not write so fast. That was the big thing. I was doing that now. He was answering. I was trying to like, so I don't even have to respond for them. I'm trying. That's the thing. I'm trying to write fast because I can't. He moved on. Right. Well, and I like what he was saying. I like what he was saying about, you know, just he talked a lot about, he had a lot of good teachers and power and so I'm not sure. Right.
What's that? I think I was pouring in there. Oh, no. No, I'm done now. That's it. I take any others. You're going to be looking that way.
I can't read my own notes. I was writing quick.
I may have to stop by.
I don't have a lot of
Yeah.
He was much more enough.
For all day meetings. You'll sneak out a little sometime, yeah.
I know, I'm slacking.
That might not be such a bad thing.
All right, I'm coming through for feedback forms if you have them.
Yes.
Did you get that little shout out?
So someone's paying attention, Donna?
I know, right? See?
We just need the legislators to pay attention. I have them. We are, but I can't, you know, it's talking and then I didn't move on and yeah,
I can just ask, I can do that at the end. One sentence for everybody.
We would have got the biggest. know, I was like, it was like, we got a lot of it was like day. It was like, it must have been rough. I know, I was like, the news didn't
That's why I say. No, I didn't.
That's my worry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was supposed to say.
The first time.
You're like, no, I'm done.
Why are we still here?
Consideration now. See, I have no issue with that. I have no issue with districts that are active.
No, thank you, that was great.
You're surrounded by multiple districts. West Bloomfield is. And he didn't mention that. No, West Bloomfield.
I mean, there is some, absolutely.
Student population to maintain.
Follow.
Just don't go right through. Didn't go into play until 96, 97. Started happening. Crash. And it was so I did
Drive that far.
Yes, and they're looking and it's unfortunately
Oh, yeah.
everything is like
I know. That's why I said, that's why I So our next candidate's going to be coming in a second. We'll get started.
No, but that's your service. You're right.
Was an amazing teacher. The day she said I would
You're not allowed to.
No, they need us.
Yeah.
Well, our final interview of the evening is with Mr. John Mertz, who is the Director of Instructional Services at Bay Area ISD. Welcome, John. So that microphone's on.
Okay. Welcome. We appreciate you taking the time to interview with us and your interest in our superintendency position. We'll begin our questions, so you know all board members will ask questions. I will start, we'll do a round robin and go around until we finish. And so with that, can you tell us what has prepared you to be the next superintendent of the Waterford School District?
Well, first off, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening. It's a great honor to be selected as a candidate and to have the opportunity to be here. That being said, I think I can pretty much sum up, I know you've had the opportunity to review my resume, but I think I can probably sum up what's prepared me in 2 words: experience and commitment. If you look at my experience for the position, not only have I had the opportunity to serve very successfully as a superintendent for 7 years, but also I've had the opportunity to work with districts from 100 students to over 9,000 students in my current role. And I've had the opportunity to interact with people all around the state of Michigan and develop partnerships and networks with people all around the state. In terms of commitment, I think you're going to find, if you talk with people about me, that you're going to find someone that works nonstop to try and establish strong partnerships, someone that puts a great deal of time into research, planning, preparation, into everything that they do, and you're going to find someone that doesn't do anything halfway. You're going to find somebody that cares very deeply about our educational system, wants the very best for the staff that he works with and for the students that he supports.
With that, we will move on to our next question to be asked by Trustee Jocelyn, and then from there we'll proceed around the table.
Provide an example of a situation that accurately reflects your leadership style. Then, describe your leadership style and explain how you came to embrace it.
You know, I was thinking about a lot of different times over the course of my career, a lot of different things, but I think one that really comes to mind for me would be, I was thinking back to one of the earlier years when I was a superintendent around 2012, and the tragic events that were going on in our country right around Christmas time with Newtown, Connecticut. And a lot of threats started popping up around mid-Michigan and our schools around that time. And unfortunately, my school district experienced the same type of issue. We had a threat against one of our schools. And I had to pull together my administrative team at the school that had received the threat. And we talked about it. We brought in local law enforcement. We discussed the threat with law enforcement. Rumors had really started to fly in the school. And I remember sitting down with law enforcement at the time and asking them, in terms of looking at if we were going to be able to have school the next day, could they guarantee the safety of the kids based on the information they had at that time and how the investigation was taking place? And they told me that with all the information that they had at the time, they didn't think they were going to be able to do it. And so a decision had to be made at that point, and we needed to make a decision on whether to have school or not. So I made the decision at that point that we were going to close school for the next day. But understanding the dynamics of my district, it isn't a situation where there was just one building on that campus. There were multiple buildings on that campus. And not only that, but we had shared staff. So the decision that I was making was to shut down our school district, in fact, and it was right before the holidays. And as you start thinking of those dynamics, you start thinking of kids that are involved in Christmas parties and all the different types of things that go along with that. So from there, we went to, I contacted all of our Board of Education members to discuss that with them, what needed to be done. Pulled our administrative team, our entire administrative team together to discuss the situation with them and make plans on how we were going to deal with it. From there, we sent out a school messenger call to parents so they would know what was going on. And then we followed up that school messenger call with a detailed letter to parents explaining the situation. We didn't stop there because we put some additional safety measures in place. So when kids came back after the Christmas break, they had staff there to greet them at the door. We had a new video intercom system, and we had yet another follow-up letter to parents explaining to them what had taken place. And that kind of gives you an idea of a decision-making process and a chain for how things took place. To get to the second part of what is my style or leadership style, I think a lot of people will probably tell you that they're servant leaders or that they're collaborative leaders, and I think that really addresses the mode that I normally like to work in. I like to be a collaborative leader. I like to work with people and make decisions with people. But what really, I think my style is best described as situational leadership, because I think you can collaboratively work with people. But I've found over the course of the years, there are going to be times where when you're in a position such as this, you're going to have to make a decision. And I think when you develop trust, when you develop respect, when you work together with people, and when they understand, when you have that relationship with them, they understand that sometimes decisions have to be made.
Thank you. Based on your research of the district, how would you go about cultivating a productive relationship with and amongst the Board of Education?
I've had the opportunity over the course of my administrative career the last 20 years or so to work with a number of different boards of education, and we've been in a number of different situations, from local boards to ISD boards to even county-wide school board meetings that we've had. And I think right now we need to start with the fundamental understanding that public education in Michigan is under attack. And it's been under attack if you look at the standpoint of finances, the financial structure and the financial problems that all districts in Michigan are facing, and I don't think it matters what district it is. You look at the fact of student achievement in Michigan, whether you're talking about third grade, read by grade 3, third grade reading law, or whether you're talking about some of the other issues that schools are facing, critical shortage, staffing shortages, things like that. I think we need to find the common ground, and we need to work together to find common ground. I think that's the first place I would begin with any board of education, would be to look at developing a strategic plan refining, developing a strategic plan, looking at what the vision is for the school district. How do we define high expectations for all of our students? What are our shared beliefs? What type of communication structure do we have in place, both internal communication and external communication? And how are we going about communicating with our constituents? And then I've always found it very effective to do board workshops. We've found a tremendous amount of success with budgeting workshops, for example. We spent a great deal of time on that when I was a superintendent. And then we worked around things such as the dynamic budgeting software from MSBO to look at projections for where our district was moving. And then professional learning. It's kind of interesting I mentioned professional learning because on a side note, I kind of got dinged on that one with my evaluations with our board. Over my 7 years as a superintendent, my board used an evaluation system where we received a rating schedule, or rating scale, I should say. It was pretty much like a standard grading scale from up to 100%. I think the lowest I got was a 97.9 one year. But they always dinged me on professional learning despite offering them professional learning. And I don't think it matters whether you're looking at like an MSBO type workshop or bringing in an outside facilitator, but professional learning has been fantastic for staff, professional learning fantastic for administrators. I think we need to look at professional learning for our boards of education as well. And I think that's a tremendous tool that sometimes is overlooked.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Could you please describe what your track record is with regard to attracting and retaining school personnel, including instructional staff, when resources are limited?
It seems like my entire time in administration in my district before I got to the ISD and Essexville Hampton Public Schools, we dealt with budget difficulties. And so we were always fighting that battle of trying to find the money to bring in new staff. And we always dealt with the issue of when we did go out and recruit new staff, we always had a level of how much we could offer. We could only bring them in at a certain step. We couldn't exceed that step. We were very fortunate, though, that our district had outstanding NEET scores, or MSTEP as it's called now. We had usually had the best scores in the county or in the ISD. We had a lot of, we had an outstanding reputation in our district. I was very fortunate. We had my student teachers that were student teachers for me in the district came in to work for us. Kids that went to school in our district came in to be teachers. And then one of the things that we did, which I thought was quite unique, is we actually worked with our chamber and with our business and education partnership to put together a committee to try and retain and attract talent for our region, which was pretty successful as well. But just to give you an example of kind of a current situation for me, that to show how much we spent time working on this and how critical this is for me, early literacy and read by grade 3, had to go out and hire a reading coach in this past year. The Michigan Department of Education gave us a grant for $37,500 to hire a full-time coach. We had to find $37,500 to match that. And if you do the math on that, obviously, that still isn't enough to pay for a full-time person. So I had to find the additional money in the budget to make up for that. And then we have the additional problem of even coming up with the money to find that person. Then you're going to go out and try and recruit someone for a job knowing that it's a grant-funded position, and they're worried about, do I want to take a job knowing that it's based on a grant? So what we did is worked with our Board of Education to emphasize the importance of and work with our local districts to get memos of understanding from them for the need for this type of position. And we built it into the budget so it could be an ongoing position, recognizing the importance of the third grade reading law. So when we did post that position, we ended up having 8 very highly qualified candidates, excellent candidates, and we filled that position for this year. Now we're looking at going towards a second position. So that's kind of some ideas of how we thought about that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Tell us about a situation in which you have brought disparate groups of people together in a difficult issue. How did you personally provide leadership in the situation, and what was the outcome?
I think probably one of the best examples of that would be when I worked with our Chamber of Commerce and our ISD as a local superintendent to set up a county-wide school board meeting. Now, when you understand the dynamics of Bay and Aranet counties, as I kind of alluded to a few minutes ago, you're talking about school districts where you may have a population of a couple hundred kids or 400 kids to a district like Bay City Public Schools, which is not all that dissimilar to your own, with a couple of large high schools and an alternative school and a couple of large middle schools and so forth. So you've got schools and school districts that are very different ends of the spectrum, and then you're also trying to bring into this equation business leaders and community leaders, and you're trying to bring them together on an issue. I was tasked with trying to set up this countywide school board meeting, and this was taking place at the time when there were a lot of discussions around our community and around the state about consolidation of school districts. And our goal in bringing this meeting together was to get people to see the positive and to see the good that was going on within our local districts, to start looking at some of the ways we were sharing resources and talk about additional ways that we could work together. And I guess, for lack of a better phrase, to say, to get business on our side and to get them to understand what we were doing and to build partnerships. The overall goal, the overall outcome of that first meeting was that we ended up having additional meetings. These meetings took place over the course of 3 years. So we had 3 years of countywide school board meetings. We looked at shared transportation or shared transportation resources. They continued on. As we came together, we looked at a lot of interesting dynamics, shared software purchasing, a lot of different things like that, which were very beneficial to our districts. But I think probably the biggest thing that came out of it is we built a business and education partnership that continues to this day with the Chamber, that's brought about great things like mock job interviews, reading as Bay County's business, and great things that gets local business leaders into our schools. Yes.
Please explain how you've improved student achievement in a previous position. Be specific. We are looking to hear about the situation, the objective you set out to accomplish, and the actions you took and the outcomes.
I could talk about my school district probably all day. Well, not all day, because I got up pretty early this morning, and it's about my bedtime, to be honest with you. But I was very proud of the record that we had in Essexville Hampton. Let me give you an example from the ISD, because I think that's a little bit more relevant, a little bit more recent. I got to Bay Aranet ISD 5 years ago. The ISD had asked me to join them, and I thought it was a great opportunity because it gave me the chance to work with all of the schools within the region that I was at. When I first got there, my first week on the job, as a matter of fact, first couple of days on the job, I was setting up my office. My superintendent, who I'd known for about 10 years, forwarded an email to me, and it was from the state superintendent at the time, Mike Flanagan. And it was indicating that one of our schools within our ISD was identified as a priority school. And if you remember those designations from about 5 years ago, they're now CSI, or Comprehensive Support Schools, and TSI. The priority schools were the schools that were in the bottom 5% of all schools in the state of Michigan. And so I remember seeing the email, and I sent it back to her, and I said something like, wow, this is going to be interesting to see how all this plays out, not thinking much of it. A couple minutes later, I got a second email from her, and it was the second one of our schools was identified as a priority school. And then a couple minutes later, I got a third email, and it was a third school. We ended up with 3 priority schools and 1 focus school. And as the new director of instructional services, I was in charge of not only the regional assistance grant for the ISD, but in providing supports to these priority schools. And what that basically entailed was we had to put together a team. We had to sit down with the schools and develop a comprehensive plan for working with those schools because there were only two options. They were either going to turn around their status or those schools were going to close. We put together what was known as an unpacking tool, and the unpacking tool is pretty much similar to a school improvement plan, but it had to be a very detail-oriented plan that described exactly how all the dollars were going to be used, how they were going to use the regional assistant grant funds, how they were going to use their existing title funds that the school had, how they were going to use all of the funds in their budget. They had to identify what they were going to do with all their supports. We had to set goals, we had to set measures, and then we had to track student achievement for each one of the years that those schools were identified as priority. We set up regular staff meetings. We went in and met with the staff. We set up quarterly board reports with them where they reported to the Board of Education. We had liaison partner meetings with the Michigan Department of Education, and when it was all said and done, all three of the priority schools were released from priority status. So they went from the 5% ranking out of priority status. Some of them made some pretty dramatic gains. The one school, though, ended up, because their population had gone down so much, although they were released, they ended up moving their kids out to another district, which was unfortunate for that school. But the other schools had made some pretty dramatic gains. The one school that we worked with was a charter school, and that was quite an experience for me, quite an experience in learning, coming from public school to work with a charter school.
Tell us about your experience with collective bargaining and fostering productive relationships with unions.
Had a number of different experiences over the years in bargaining. As an assistant superintendent, I sat directly on bargaining teams with my superintendent and former superintendent. We did research for negotiations. We prepared for negotiations. We sat with the board for negotiations, and we were pretty much involved in all aspects of the negotiation process. And that was throughout about 4 years of time as an assistant superintendent. As a superintendent, the board and I made a decision together that it would be best not to sit down directly at the bargaining table. And what I did was, I was there when negotiations were taking place, and when the bargaining team caucused, they would come and meet with me, and we would discuss offers, we would discuss what was taking place, and then I would sit down obviously with the board, but I wasn't directly involved in the negotiations. The primary reason for that, we had some difficulties with the previous administration. There were some concerns related to the district at that time, and we really felt like we wanted to spend a lot of time working on positive relations with the district. And we felt at that time that it probably wasn't best to have the superintendent directly involved in negotiations. As far as fostering positive relations with the union, which I think is really kind of a second part to your question, spent a lot of time working with our bargaining groups as far as open communications, clear communications. We had problem-solving meetings. We spent a lot of time one-on-one communications with our association and union leadership. I was very pleased with the fact in my 7 years as superintendent that I never had a grievance with our MEA groups. That's not to say that anything was easy or that there weren't any difficulties, but we were very good at sitting down together and working through things and talking.
What is your approach to improving instruction?
I think the biggest thing about improving instruction is a quality school improvement plan. I think it all comes down to the school improvement plan. I've seen a lot of times, particularly in my work at the ISD, when you look at school improvement plans, where sometimes school improvement plans are the work of one or two people, or they happen in haste, or they haven't been entirely thought through to the extent that they probably should be. But if you look at the continuous school improvement process, and if you look at kind of the MyKit process that the Michigan Department of Education is rolling out now, and what all of that entails, if you have a quality school improvement process, and by that I mean you're looking at all aspects of construction are tied to that plan, where you actually sit down and you have everyone going through in a meaningful way. You have stakeholders involved, you're setting goals, you have your strategies, you have your activities, you have your budget tied to it, you're monitoring, you're evaluating, you're going through at the end, you're doing your program, your review, and all of those different components are tied to it. Then I think you're going to see a positive impact on instruction. And I think that's really a key to it. We've tried to do that type of work with our local districts. We've tried to bring in with them a lot of data tools to look at where they're at, such as my school data and data warehouse and things like that, to work with our districts. And I think we start, from that standpoint, we start to get at really seeing some advances in achievement.
Share an example of how you've applied a creative or innovative approach to a district management or resource generation.
We spent a lot of time in my district trying to be very creative with our budget. We had to be, because we didn't have a lot of extra money to go around. One of the things I was really proud of was the fact that we had a service consolidation plan that we submitted to the state of Michigan, where we shared a lot of resources with other local districts and with the ISD. And I mentioned that a few minutes ago. I believe I talked about transportation consolidation, where we had another school district working on maintenance for our buses. We had shared software with the ISD and things like that. But one of the things that I thought was really cool and kind of a neat way to generate some revenue for the district is we actually worked with a local company, a communications company. We used the light pole tower at our football stadium. They put a cell tower on it, and we had a contract with them. And not only did we generate money for the school district, and I asked the board to dedicate those funds to go back into instruction for textbooks, but we also saved money on cell phones for the administrators. And I thought that was, given the budget times, I thought that was a pretty creative way to raise money for instruction and for the school district. Another thing we did was we rented out rooms, some extra classrooms that we had. We rented out classrooms to the ISD. And the ISD was able to put programs into those classrooms, and we rented them for $10,000 a room. And we had 5 rooms at one point. We were getting $50,000 a year. Not only was that a win for the school district in terms of generating revenue, but it was a win for the ISD because they were able to set those programs up in our buildings, and those students were able to participate in programs going on in the buildings were appropriate. So those are just a couple examples of ways we were able to do some creative funding and some creative financing.
Excellent, thank you.
While people may have different ideas about which decisions need to be made, we agree that some difficult decisions need to be made in Waterford, and that both the process for the decision-making as well as the follow-through will be key. Can you please share with us an experience that perhaps best illustrates your process for leading a district through a difficult decision, as well as your practices related to follow-through after the decision was made?
Without a doubt, one of the most difficult decisions in my career that I had to make was closing a school building. We had 3 elementary buildings in my school district, and looking at our budget, looking at our population, looking at everything involved, we had to close the building. What we did was, in talking with our Board of Education, I recommended that we put together a committee to look at closing the building. We set up a committee of stakeholders from across the district, from a broad range of representation. We had stakeholders from all of our schools, we had parents, we had representation, just about every group you could think of on the committee. We set it up where they had, the committee had open meetings. They had them held at different schools in the evening so people could attend. They took minutes, we posted the minutes. We had public comment, people had the opportunity to comment at the meetings. And then we communicated out after the meetings took place. When it was all said and done, the committee made a recommendation back to the board that one of the buildings could be closed. We sat down and we went through that recommendation, and then I drafted a plan with my administrative team for the board on what that closing would look like. We went through and we made a very detailed plan based on the committee's recommendation on how that would have to take place, what the move would look like, staffing that would be impacted, proposed timelines, building closure, dates for building closure, all of those different types of things, costs associated with the move, any staffing impacts they would see, and all of those different types of things. When it was all said and done, we also came up with some ideas for proposed usage of the building, because that was a key component of it as well. We had, as I indicated, we had 3 buildings. The building that was recommended for closure was the only one that was in the city. We had 2 other buildings that were both within townships, so that was a key factor for us as well. What we ended up doing with that building, just kind of on a side note, we sold the building to a charter school, which is it's a charter alternative school through our ISD, and it was a program where a lot of our districts, including our own, sent kids to. So it actually ended up becoming a win-win for everybody. Our Boys and Girls Club through the community found a home there as well. Our transportation fleet was located there. We made a deal with them through the agreement to mow the lawn and plow snow in exchange for keeping the transportation fleet there. To kind of finish out that arrangement, and finish out the end of the year, we, when we looked at closing the building, we had a closing celebration for the community, for the students that had gone there in the past, for staff and so forth. We, I indicated we had meetings and we shared out minutes of the meetings. We also had a number of letters that went out to the community throughout the process, board presentation on where we were at, with a lot of communication along the way with how that took place. But, you know, as I indicated, very difficult process, but a lot of involvement.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
If you could please tell us about your experience right-sizing these schools.
I think probably the previous question gives you a little bit of an indication of that, but there was another key component to that whole process that took place a couple of years earlier that gave me a great deal of experience, and that was we went through tiering in our school district, and that was under the superintendent before me, and I have to say it was probably one of the least popular things we ever did in our school district. Our elementary schools were configured as neighborhood schools, but what the district looked at, and I was assistant superintendent at the time, the district looked at going to K1, 2, 3, and 4, 5 buildings instead of K5 neighborhood schools. And our district, size-wise, in terms of geography-wise, I should say, wasn't a huge district, so it allowed the opportunity to study that. But what we gained in looking at a tiered component was we had a problem in our district of class sizes were kind of all over the place. And the other dynamic, of course, in our district was schools of choice. We were a district of about 1,800 kids at the time. 500 of them were schools of choice students from neighboring districts. So that presented an interesting dynamic. You'd have a school with a couple of 5th grade classes, and you might have 31 and 33, and you're looking at another school with 5th grade classes with 20 and 23. So that's why another reason for looking at the tiering dynamic, and going through that whole tiering process gave us the option of balancing out those class sizes. So my role in all of that, what I was tasked with was really looking at populations, looking at professional learning for the teachers, looking at the whole dynamics of bringing everyone together. How do we study the whole population aspect of it? How do we look at the professional learning aspect of it? In the end, it ended up being a positive for the district. I remember when I first took over as superintendent, a lot of the questions I faced are, well, now that you're here, are we going to get rid of tiering? Now that you're here, are we going to get rid of tiering? And at that point, when I first took over, we didn't really have enough information on it, but it actually ended up becoming a positive for us down the road that allowed us to do a lot of the things we did with right-sizing our school district and bringing that balance together. Our district, as far as schools of choice, we never followed open enrollment. It was the limited choice enrollment.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Describe your approach to communication. What evidence of this approach will we find when talking with stakeholders in your current district?
Excessive. I think, I've always really liked the quote, if you don't tell your story, someone else is going to tell it for you. My first job in administration, and I don't know if you noticed that when you were looking at my resume or not, I interviewed with my superintendent in Essexville, and he told me that he wanted me to do marketing and communications for our school district. And I said, you gotta be kidding me, I'm just gonna go back to my classroom. And, but they wanted me to do calendars, they wanted me to do brochures, they wanted me to do bulletins, they wanted me to do all that type of stuff. And I dreaded it, but I did it, and aside from that, I had some other great experiences with assessment and all those types of things. But it turned out to be the greatest experience of my life. And I've used that in every job that I've had since. And like I said, if you don't tell your story, someone else is going to tell it for you. And I've kind of lived by that. And I think if you talk to people about me, that's one thing that you're going to learn is that I'm constantly promoting our schools, I'm constantly promoting our staff, I'm constantly promoting the great things that we do. Right now, I'm in the process of every week putting out a newsletter. It's called the Curriculum Corner. And I share in there a lot of information about the schools in Bay and Internet counties, but it's not just our counties, it's for the 5 ISDs in the region that we work in. And it goes out to those 5 ISDs, but we also have about 900 readers around the state of Michigan that have jumped on board with it. And we're pretty proud of the work that we're doing with that. I've been working on, I really like Twitter, although I'm not sure that I'm the best at it. I have about 420 followers right now, and I've been working on a Twitter following. We've been doing a professional learning conference every year in the fall. Our professional learning conference at the ISD used to be the day after the Super Bowl for teachers. And when I first got there, I said, what in the heck are you doing that for? That's about the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. Have everybody go to the, watch the Super Bowl, and the next day you go and do professional learning. We put it at the beginning of the school year. And when people are back, they're excited, they're motivated, and they're ready to learn. And the link to communication, you'll see where I'm going with this in a second. We have about 150 breakout sessions that people go to at the Professional Learning Conference. We have speakers, national speakers, statewide speakers, state superintendent, and then I put together the entire Professional Learning Conference brochure, put that together for them using a variety of different communication software platforms. But anyway, people will tell you that I'm really big on being an effective communicator, sharing a message with them, but at the same time, I think face-to-face communications is important. Nothing irritates me more than a person that's sitting 10 feet away from you that sends you an email when you're right there and they can walk over and talk to you. A lot of times, I would get up and go to a building and speak with someone in person when they sent me an email, just so I could have the opportunity to interact with that person and talk with that person. I took great, and I understand the dynamics of your district are a little bit different than when I was superintendent, but I took great pride in having the kids know who I was. And I think the kids really enjoyed that as well. I think it's important to make those personal connections, and I think those are the types of things you find out about them. Thank you.
describe your vision of a strong district-wide curriculum program.
You know, first of all, I think people get the term curriculum confused sometimes. I think they misunderstand what a curriculum is versus what standards are. They don't really, a lot of times understand the difference. When you look at the term curriculum, you talk about lessons, you talk about the overall academic content of a school or of a district and all of the programs that go into that. That being said, I do think you need to have strong standards. I think you need to have goals and strategies, the assessments, the resources, and all of those things that go into it. You need to have strong tools to back up your curriculum. I think that a strong curriculum needs to have options for kids. I think we need to understand that not all students are in the same place. Not all students learn in the same way. And I think if I've learned anything in the last couple of years, it's been really important to me in my role as a board member on Michigan ASCD, it's been to work around the whole child and understanding that students come to us with a lot of different needs, with a lot of different problems, and that if we're not designing a curriculum that understands that and that adapts to that, then we're in serious trouble. So I think when I look at a strong curriculum, looking at STEM, looking at opportunities for kids, looking at opportunities for college, yet understanding not all kids are going to go to college and that's okay. That's what a strong curriculum means.
Leading a school district requires a superintendent that can inspire staff members to the highest levels of performance and also hold them accountable. Provide an example of how you have inspired staff members while also holding them accountable.
When I took over as superintendent in my school district, I was a little concerned because we used to have an opening day staff meeting like a lot of districts do. Ours was kind of crap, I guess, for lack of a better term, because everybody had we had a breakfast and then people went back and worked in their rooms. And that was counted as a professional learning day, and it kind of gone downhill pretty much year after year for a number of years. And that first one that I had as superintendent, I kind of, and maybe it wasn't, I put a little bit of pressure on myself, but I thought that was going to make or break me. And I really thought that that was my one opportunity. And granted, when I was going into that, I've been in the district for 13 years already, both as a teacher and a central office administrator, so people knew me. And I think it's fair to say people liked me. But that was going to, I thought in my mind that was going to make or break me. It was the 50th anniversary of our school district. So what we did is we took that as an opportunity to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the school district at that opening day. And we had a big celebration. We talked about the 50 years of the district, all the wonderful things that had taken place in those 50 years. And then we actually brought out some data. Here are some great things that our district has done so far. And then my challenge to them was, we've had 50 great years. Where are we going to go in the next 50 years? What are you going to do next? And I really challenged them to step up and where they were going to go from there and kind of set the tone moving forward. That's just kind of in a nutshell what it was all about. My presentation got a standing ovation. I almost cried. I was so amazed with how well it went. And it really, I think, you talk about, kind of holding people accountable yet setting a tone. I think that was kind of a defining moment for me and where things went from there. And it kind of unfortunately set the bar because each year I had to make it better. And so we worked on that.
What is it about this job specifically that appeals to you?
I think there's probably a couple things that come to mind. I would say probably opportunity and potential. I visited the community this past weekend. I actually came down with my son and we went around and toured your community. And as I was looking through the community and as I was researching the district and I was talking to a friend who graduated from here, I think I have to admit I was very excited by all the opportunities that you have available. Looked at things like the Waterford STEM Academy, Hour of Code, Summer of STEAM, all of those great things. You know, and for us in my area, STEM's been huge, obviously with Dow Chemical, and that's been a big push for us now with school-time STEM works and things like that. I saw a really cool video on Twitter with one of your elementary schools, I believe it was Houghton Elementary, and the kids were walking into the new gym for the first time, and they were seeing that and looking at the work that you've been doing with your bond project. And I've got to tell you, as the parent of a 10th grade boy and a 6th grade girl, that just blew me away to see that. That was really cool to see all of those opportunities. So for that, that was fantastic. And the potential as well. The potential for everything that you have down the road to accomplish even more. Those are the things that really interest me. And the other thing, I guess probably the big question out there, I went to the ISD ISD asked me to join them, and I left the superintendency, but not having the opportunity to interact with kids has been huge for me. And that's a huge part of it as well. So I think those are probably the biggest things. Yeah.
And we certainly appreciate your interest in this position, and as we wind down our conversation, do you have any closing thoughts that you'd like to share with us?
You know, I guess I would just say that, and I let off with this, I was honored to be selected to be here. I've been, you know, in my local district when I was an assistant superintendent, I went through several superintendent searches before the board asked me to be superintendent. So from that standpoint, I know what you're going through, been through the process, and I know you need to find the right fit for you, and I wish you luck with that process. I'm just very appreciative that you've offered me the opportunity to be here and talk with you this evening, and I'm grateful for your time. I'm very grateful for your consideration, and I wish you best of luck, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, I came in, I missed the first one as well, and I came in on here. So I didn't really get a good feel from her because I didn't have to. So I missed them. So, yeah, they
As we end, I just want to remind everybody, we're going to do this again tomorrow. We have 3 candidates tomorrow, right back here, same time, same place. And after our candidates tomorrow, we will have a meeting and talk and discuss about who we would like to bring back for second round interviews. With that, the meeting is adjourned. The board is going to stick around so we can get copies of all your feedback forms before we leave. So if you can turn those in to Donna, she's going to make copies of everything you've given tonight. And so before the board leaves, we will have everyone's comments. So thank you everybody for attending.
I wouldn't miss her.